section 5.2 is concerning polynomials. First, let's start with a little bit of terminology. Okay. Like terms would be two monomials that differ only in terms of their coefficients. Like if I said 2x and 4x. They are like terms because they both have an x, and one has a coefficient of 2 and one has a coefficient of 4. If I said negative 3x squared y, a like term with that would be 10x squared y. Now, when you go to do math on polynomials, you can only combine like terms. A polynomial is a monomial or sum of monomials. Each separate monomial is called a term. So a binomial is a polynomial with two terms. So 2xy squared plus 4x would be a binomial. Here's one term, here's the second term. A trinomial is a polynomial with three terms. So, like for instance, negative 2x plus 4y minus 3z would be a trinomial. First term, second term, third term. One of the things that they'll ask you to do with a polynomial is to find the degree of the polynomial. A degree has to do with the powers or the exponents. And so we have to find the degree of each individual term of the polynomial, and then the polynomial degree is literally the highest degree of that polynomial. So in other words, the degree of this term of this polynomial is 6 plus 4 plus 2, so the degree of that term is 12. The degree of this term is 3 plus 5, or 8. So the degree of this polynomial is the larger of those two. So the degree of that polynomial is 12. Over here, the degree of this term is 3. The degree of this term is 2, because remember there's an understood 1 with each of those variables. So therefore, the degree of this polynomial is the highest of the two, so it's 3. They ask you to find the degree of this polynomial. It is actually a trick question because this is not a polynomial because there is a variable underneath a square root. Your variable cannot be on the bottom of a fraction, and it can't be underneath a square root and have it still be considered a polynomial. We're going to be using polynomials in problems. Like for instance, I've got this pentagon, and if it asked me to find the perimeter of the pentagon, I would have to add all the sides together. So I start with a 5x plus 4 plus 2 plus 10x plus x squared plus negative 5x, I'm just working my way around, plus 15x plus 12 plus negative 4x plus 14. Now I have to combine my like terms. Well, I only have one x squared, so I'm going to go ahead and write that down. It doesn't match with anything else, so I can't combine them. But now I'm going to go back, and everything that has an x to the first power, I'm going to put together. So 5x plus 10x is 15x, minus 5x is 10x, plus 15x would be 25x, minus 4x would be 21x. So that's my next. And I'm going to mark out everything that I have just added together. So what I'm left with is just the numbers, or what we call the constants. So 4 plus 2 is 6, plus 12 is 18, plus 14 would be 32. So plus 32. So this right here would be the answer to the perimeter of that pentagon. many of these problems, it will just simply say simplify, which means add or subtract as you can with the like terms. Now remember, you can only put together the terms that match. So the one thing I will say here is I would always add the opposite of the second number all the way through the problem. So I would do it in the parentheses first, and then I would go back with subtraction and add the opposite. So that's a -8, a -2, a positive x cubed, and a positive x to the fourth. So the highest power I have is x to the fourth. So I'm going to start with that one. And then I have an x to the third here. So it's a positive x to the third. Then I'm adding with a -4x to the third. So that's plus a -3x to the third. So I've done that one. I've done this one. And I've done this one. I have an 10x squared here. And I have a -10x squared there. So that's a positive 2x squared. And then I have a -3x and a -2x. So that's going to give me a -5x. So that right here would be your answer for that problem that you're subtracting. This is another subtraction one. Okay, so again, I would add the opposites inside my parentheses. It'll make it easier. You'll make less mistakes. Then I have a subtraction between them. So I'm going to add the opposite of everything behind it. So that becomes a plus. This is a negative. This becomes a positive. And this becomes a positive. The highest power of x that I have is x squared. So here's a 2x squared plus a -4x squared. So that's going to give me a -2x squared. So I've added that one and I've added that one. Then I've got a -3y and a positive 3y. So that's equal to 0. Okay, they cancel each other out. And I have a 5x squared and a positive 2x squared. So that's a 7x squared. Okay, those are all subtraction, but you'll do the same thing if you were doing addition. Okay, just make sure that you're adding the things that match, the things that are like terms. You also can do multiplication with polynomials. This one is a monomial times a polynomial. I'm going to add the opposite of the second number here. And then you'll notice that this is multiplied by this set of parentheses that has a binomial in it. So you have to do distributive property. Now, I have a -9a squared times a 3a. If I multiply the -9 and the 3 together, that gives me a -27. 9a times a, remember if the base numbers are the same, you add the exponents, so that's going to give me an a to the third. And then I take -9a squared times the -7b squared, which is going to give me a positive 63, because -9 times -7. And then I have an a squared times a b cubed, which I cannot combine, so I have to just leave it just like that. I'm going to angle this different. I'm having a hard time writing on it. I hope you can still see it when I do that. These are binomials times binomials, which is FOIL. So remember, FOIL is first, outside, inside, last. So my first terms would be an x times an x, which is an x squared. Then I'm going to do my outside terms, which is going to be x times -4x, so I have, or -4, so I have a -4x. Then I'm going to do my inside terms, which is x times 8, so plus 8x. And then I'm going to do my last, which is 8 times -4, so that's a -32. These two match, so I can put those together. So I have x squared plus 4x plus -32. This is still FOIL because it's a binomial times a binomial. That's the only time you can do FOIL is when it's a binomial times a binomial. So I have, and if you want to, you can add the opposite. It might help. Okay, so first gives me 3y squared times a negative 3y. So that's negative 9y cubed. Outside is going to give me 15y squared. Inside is going to give me a positive 6y. And last is going to give me a negative 10. Now, not a single one of those match as far as terms, like terms go. So I can't combine them. I've got to leave them just like that. Now, when you have something like this, recognize that that means 3y plus 4 times 3y plus 4. Do not just square the first term and square the second term. That's not what that means. So I'm doing FOIL on this. So first is going to give me 9y squared. Outside is going to give me 12y. Inside is going to give me 12y. And last is going to give me 16. So I can combine those two together. So I get 9y squared plus 24y plus 16. Now, you can also have polynomials times polynomials. So if you have something besides binomial times a binomial, then you have to do distributive property on these things. So I'm going to add the opposite here, and I'll add the opposite here, and I'm going to take x times each one of those, times this, and times this. So I have 5x cubed plus 2x squared plus a negative 3x. That's what I get when I multiply x times each one. Then I have to take the negative 3 times each one. So negative 3 times 5x squared is a negative 15x squared plus a negative 6x plus a positive 9. My highest power of 3 is to the third power, so I have 5x cubed that I'm going to start with because I want to write it in descending order. Then I have a 2x squared and a negative 15x squared, so that's going to be a negative 13x squared. And then I have a negative 3x and a negative 6x, which is going to be a negative 9x. And then I have a plus 9 that I don't have anything to combine with. So that would be the answer to that multiplication problem. Over here, I have a trinomial times a trinomial. So again, I'm going to take this times each one of these terms, then this one times each one of those terms, and then this one times each one of those terms. So you're doing distributive property 3 times. So 2x squared times 3x is 6x to the 4th power. 2x squared times 2x is going to be 4x cubed. 2x squared times 4 is going to be 8x squared. Then I would go on to the 4x, and I would multiply that times each one. So 4x times 3x squared is 12x squared. Actually, it's 12x cubed, okay, because I have an x and I have a squared. And then 4x times 2x is 8x squared. And then 4x times 4 is going to be a 16x. Then I'm going to take the negative 3 times each. So I have a negative 9x squared, negative 6x, and negative 12. Now I have to combine my like terms. The highest power of x I have is to the 4th power, so 6x to the 4th. Then I have a cubed here and a cubed here, so that's going to give me 16x cubed. And then I have an 8x and an 8x, which is going to give me 16x squared. minus 9x, so that's going to give me a 7x squared. And then I have a 16x minus a 6x, which is going to give me a 10x. And then minus 12. Just a little at a time, so you're going to distribute each one of those to the next polynomial. All right, your homework is on page 264 through 265, 18 through 58 even.